Hello once again, my YouTube family and friends. It's a pleasure to be with you once more as you join me in delving into the crazy world we live in. And if you're joining me for the first time, you're listening to the 27th installment of the Patriot Preacher. My name is Charles Wells, and I am the Patriot Preacher. Well, my beloved listeners, history never fails to repeat itself, does it? I was talking to one of my sons the other day as he expressed his disbelief that such an incursion as we are witnessing in the Ukraine could possibly happen at this point in history. It is, after all, very reminiscent of something we would see in the history books when studying, World War II, for example. He, of course, was making the assumption that somehow civilization had matured to a point where such major conflicts were a thing of the past. We somehow believe that we have, through our technological evolution, arrived at the point where we have transcended such outright and brutal conflicts. But as I have said many times, before the United States of America was willed into existence by a few courageous, albeit flawed men, the world was ruled by tyranny and oppression, and in many places throughout the world it still is. Our freedoms, while ordained by God, are tenuous at best in the world of man. Culture and technology may evolve, but human behavior remains constant and rather predictable. The problem is that we always look at the world through the lens of our own lifetime events, particularly the ones that have occurred during our adulthood, which is when we pay the most attention, of course. What I'm about to talk about is partly about politics, but also an indictment on the nature of humanity and its capacity to facilitate and perpetuate evil. We're seeing that capacity for evil on display as we witness Ukrainian people being systematically murdered for the greed and ambition of just one man, as he forcefully takes what is obviously not his. Not only that, but we watch what his evil ambitions are doing to the young Russian men, some of whom are as young as 17, as they are forced to do his bidding and become accomplices in his evil doing. It sickens me, really, to see human behavior on display when there are no boundaries to it. We don't do very well without boundaries, do we, folks? In fact, if we don't have any limits placed upon us as individuals or as a nation, then there are no limits to the evil we are capable of. The old saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely is right on point. Whenever you place all the decision-making, the power of that, in the hands of one or even a handful of men, they will abuse it over time, even if their initial intentions started out being benevolent. The fact is that evil abounds in this world. It always has, and it always will. As long as human beings have free will, they are capable of incredibly noble acts on the one hand, and are equally capable of the most unspeakably evil acts on the other. The fact is that as we walk down any street where we live, behind the closed doors of each house, whether in each street, each neighborhood, each city, each state, and this country, and the world beyond, the world is in complete chaos. The relative peace that we see on the outside is merely a facade. The only thing that binds it all together is what little love we can find inside ourselves for one another, and the love that our Lord Father has for us as a human race. But as the end of times approach, and there is a falling away or turning away from Christ's teachings, a coldness and a hardness of the human heart will take place. Because a world without love and compassion is indeed a cold place, just as this earth would be a cold place without the sun, which of course the Lord has also provided. So we have a divided world, don't we? And it is a very basic demarcation or dividing line. On one hand, we have the national governments that have at least attempted to maintain a semblance of freedom for their peoples. And on the other hand, we have nations who exact complete control over their citizenry. And all these nations have something in common, in that the people in charge always desire more power for themselves. This is immediately evident, even in our own nation. Getting off the soapbox for just a moment, was it really a surprise to the world that Vladimir Putin would actually take the steps that he has in attempting to annex the country of Ukraine? I personally don't think it was a surprise at all. Putin is an ex-KGB guy from the old Soviet Union. He has always dreamed of reassembling the 1922 empire that has essentially existed as a dictatorship until it fell into financial ruin in 1991 after years of being engaged in the Cold War with us. Putin is an extreme nationalist, Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with being a nationalist, someone who basically puts their nation first in the world affairs. After all, President Trump was a nationalist. But Putin believes that everything is on the table, and nothing should be spared in his perpetuation of his designs on Europe. At one point, the old Soviet Union held as many as 14 other nations captive under its totalitarian umbrella. So what are we supposed to do? And what could we have done to help prevent such an event, if anything? Well, I can tell you this. The only thing that individuals such as Putin, whether they're a leader of a nation or merely a neighborhood bully, understand is strength. Strength is comprised of both the ability and the will to stop what somebody else is doing to the point where it becomes too expensive for them to do what they do. That basically the price tag for their aggression is too high for them to pay. As the Irish statesman Edmund Burke has been often cited as saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That warning has never been more important, urgent, or clear. We are living in a time where our elected officials in this country that is supposed to be founded on God have deliberately reinvented good and evil. People who will tell you that there is no such thing as truth. People who will tell you that your belief in God is unfounded and foolish and a fairy tale invented by desperate people who need to believe in something. That your belief in exceptionalism or the exceptional nature of this nation is perverse because the founders were racist men. Folks, we can't be timid. We can't be afraid. We can't be shy about calling out evil when we witness it. We can't allow fear to stop us from helping others who are being overcome by evil. We can't allow evil-minded men to have their way with this world, with our communities, with our families, or with us. A Lutheran priest by the name of Friedrich Gustav Martin Niemöller uttered some very famous words more than 70 years ago, telling the chilling tale of how our silence can help the cancer of evil grow. How if we just stand on the sidelines and watch it, that we are just as responsible for the spread of evil as are the people who cause it. He was a preacher when the Nazis took over much of Europe and beyond by force. He said this, when the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent because I wasn't a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrats, I remained silent because I wasn't a Social Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. These words said so long ago ring with an ominous clarity as we watch the slow disintegration of our churches, our values, and the things that we know to be true. They are falling apart before our very eyes. What we are watching in the Ukraine is no different than what happened in World War II, except on a smaller scale, at least to this point. And while there's not an outright war going on here in our own home where bullets and shells are flying, there is a war going on, make no mistake about it, for our hearts, for our minds, and our spirit. And we must fight the fight with the full armor of the Lord Almighty. We must stand strong as a nation who fervently believes in human dignity and freedom. We must lead the way as we always have in protecting others. In my humble opinion, this conflict could have been avoided. We have been projecting extraordinary weakness to the Vladimir Putins of the world. The way we abandoned Afghanistan, leaving people loyal to America behind and untold billions of dollars worth of equipment. The way we leave our own border virtually unguarded and open for anyone who wants to come here, regardless of their intentions. The manner in which we have treated our police officers like criminals, to the point where they're afraid to perform their duties to protect and serve their assigned communities. The manner in which we have elevated criminals. The way we allow riots and criminal activity to proceed in our big cities with little or no response. And Putin, after all, was able to annex Crimea and occupy much of Georgia with virtual impunity in the past. Is it really any wonder that Mr. Putin thought he could get away with this? Dictators already have an overinflated opinion of themselves. In his distorted and dystopian view, the Ukraine rightfully belonged to him. In his view, the Western alliances were far too weak to do anything about what he intended on doing. But I believe he underestimated the Ukrainian people themselves. Even if he is able to eventually overpower the Ukrainians militarily, it is a different situation altogether in being able to maintain that control over time. People always fight harder to keep their sovereignty and freedom than do people who are trying to take it from them. It is up to us and the rest of the civilized world that believes in freedom to help on every front that we possibly can. All ties must be severed with Putin. We need to provide the Ukrainian people with both humanitarian aid through airlifts as well as donating military assets for them to defend themselves. And while we are going to pay a heavy price at the gas pump to help the Ukrainian people, when I see videos of women and children lying dead in the street, I say that that's a small price to pay to defend other human beings against such naked aggression and cruelty. Putin is a war criminal, pure and simple. He doesn't care at all about human life or the appearances to the world community at large as long as his desires can be quenched or satiated. One final note. I have not agreed with a single thing that this current administration has done, either domestically or on the world stage. I pray that President Biden will finally come to his senses and unleash our economic might by using our own natural resources to release our dependence on foreign governments for energy who are diametrically opposed to human rights, whether that be Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iran, the UAE, or Russia. It is absolutely vital that we do this so that we are free to do what is right, what is true, and what is moral without economically punishing the American people. President Biden's administration has tied our hands unnecessarily. Most of these nations would be third world nations if it weren't for their oil reserves, and we don't need them. We have been subsidizing their thirst for power for far too long. Well, folks, I've been riding high on my high horse for long enough. I hope you have enjoyed our little foray into foreign affairs. I also hope you will support the Ukrainian people in any way you can for their quest to remain free by offering up your money if you can, and your prayers, of course. If you have enjoyed yourselves today, please take the time to leave comments, get notifications on new content, and most importantly, hit that little subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Until next time, I hope your family is well and your freedoms remain intact. I love all of you. Until we meet again, goodbye and God bless.